What are they doing here? This is Master Leeds, Lady Shawk said, leader of the local merchant guild. They sold themselves into slavery to infiltrate Rolengork and thwart your then unknown future efforts here, obviously. It's a pleasure to meet you, Master Leeds, Clara said. The guildmaster bowed his head repeatedly as Clara introduced each of them in turn. He visibly faltered when Ludmilla responded to his greeting with a disgruntled grunt. I'm sure you can imagine our surprise upon finding a thriving human community where we only expected beastmen, Clara said. Master Leeds allowed himself a slight smirk. He had clearly been looking forward to their reaction. My people have had quite the adventure, my lady, he replied. As you can see, we've done quite well for ourselves. So it appears, Clara pointedly swept her gaze across the bustling marketplace. We came to open trade negotiations, but I feel that it would be prudent if we heard the tale of this adventure first. If it would please my lady, Master Leeds lowered his head again. In return, I hope my lady doesn't mind answering some questions that we ourselves have. That would depend on the question. Of course. We should take our conversation to a more appropriate setting. This way, please. Leanne tried catching glimpses of the goods on display as they were led around the periphery of the market to a raised stone platform overlooking the square. There, a few carved stone tables awaited them under the shade of a thick cloth canopy. The guildmaster gestured for them to take a seat at the largest of the tables before seating himself. I hope your journey up the Oraculon hasn't been overly strenuous or unpleasant, Master Leeds said. The last I heard, an undead horde swept down from the Katza Plains and overran the Draconic Kingdom. Have you seen the ships we arrived in? Leanne asked. Yes, of course, the guildmaster answered with a nod. I suppose even powerful monsters would have issues trying to break into those. From the sound of it, Leanne said, you guys had some pretty uncanny timing. Going by Lady Shawk's account, we reckon you were shipped off just before the undead arrived. How did that even happen? The stories we've heard about the Draconic Kingdom only involve beastmen eating your people, not taking them as slaves. Master Leeds exchanged a look with Lady Shawk, who made an unintelligible noise in return. We were just as surprised when it happened, the guildmaster said. Our only recourse up until that point was to wait for the Theocracy's forces to liberate the Draconic Kingdom as they usually do, but things were looking grimmer by the day. Lady Shawk here was part of a larger party that had arrived to observe what was going on in the Draconic Kingdom. Their leader was the one who came up with the idea. Why would this leader want human slaves when Rolengork hasn't taken any before? Clara asked. Well, he wasn't from Rolengork, for one thing, Master Leeds answered. Aside from Lady Shawk, his entire party was from the Beastman Confederacy. A long silence fell over the table as they digested the unexpected development. Were they now competing for influence over Rolengork with one of the great powers of the world? That shouldn't have been the case. As far as Leanne knew, the Beastman Confederacy's sphere of influence was so distant that only rumors that were decades or generations old ever made it to the Sorceress Kingdom's remote corner of the world. Anyone know how much stuff is between us and the Beastman Confederacy? The Sapphire Coast only covers a fraction of the distance, I think. No one could come up with anything else. Out of all of their knowledge of foreign trade routes, information about the ones running through the Cerulean Way and beyond to the heart of the continent was the most lacking. In that case, Clara asked, how did you end up in Lady Shawk's possession? That was always the intent, my lady, Master Leeds answered. Soraka didn't approve of how the Draconic Kingdom's citizens were being treated, and I believe he was acting as a sort of mentor for Lady Shawk at the time. He suggested that I take them as slaves to keep them from being eaten, Lady Shawk said. In return, they would teach my people new things that would give us all sorts of advantages. It was an ingenious idea, Master Leeds nodded. We didn't even realize it was possible until he proposed it. Now, this city is embracing the new industries we've introduced, and our trade network spans hundreds of kilometers in every direction. At this rate, all of Rolengork will be ready to integrate with the Merchant Guild within a generation. The guildmaster's proud smile melted off of his face, the faces of him and his assistants turning ashen grey. Their beastman counterparts crouched low, fur standing on end as they turned their eyes warily in every direction. Beyond the observation platform, the din of the crowd went silent and the entire jungle seemed to turn deathly still. Leanne kicked Ludmilla under the table. The guildmaster sucked in a huge breath as if he had just been released from being held underwater. What was that? Ilishnish did it, Leanne said. I did not. So you've impressed Lady Shawk enough to represent her people in our negotiations, Leanne fixed Master Leeds with her gaze. I trust you've already taken an inventory of everything they have to offer? We have, my lady, the guildmaster nodded in response. I'm sure most anyone outside of Roland Gork will be interested in the raw materials that can be obtained here. Honestly, that's probably the only thing that they'd be interested in, but I guarantee that you won't be disappointed with the quality or quantity. Master Leeds raised a hand and two of his aides came forward to place a leather folder in front of each person seated at the table. Leanne opened hers to reveal a stack of carefully penned vellum sheets. Fancy, she said. It's actually the only suitable material we have, Master Leeds let out a self-deprecating chuckle. We ran out of paper long ago and the herd seemed to eat any and all vegetation. That so? Then it would interest you to know that we have plenty of straw to get rid of. That would indeed be of great help, my lady, the guildmaster said. Before coming here, we never imagined we could ever be so desperate for the stuff. Everyone settled in to peruse the contents of the distributed documents. Leanne silently nodded to herself as she found almost exactly what she thought she would find written upon them. Well, at least trade in bulk won't be a problem. Negotiating a fair exchange will still be a challenge. I overheard some of the haggling in the market and the prices were ridiculously cheap. That's good for us. A fistful of sapphires for a bag of barley is a great bargain. I doubt Master Leeds would let us get away with that. Her attention returned to the list of commodities written on the vellum in her hand. It was limited, but everything held undeniable value. The problem was the cargo imbalance that most of the potential trades represented. Chances were that, for every 50 barges importing fodder to Roland Gork, 49 would be returning empty. This wasn't necessarily a problem for the undead-powered ships of the Sorcerer's Kingdom, but the notion was logistically offensive. A pair of women in waitresses' outfits appeared bearing beverages and trays of sliced fruits. Leanne absently popped one into her mouth as she tried to figure out what to do with the empty cargo space. Where is all this stone listed here coming from? Leanne asked. All we saw on the way here was jungle. Just like in the Draconic Kingdom, Master Leeds answered, the rivers of the Orichalon Basin in Roland Gork begin as streams in the mountain ranges to the north and south. Our trade network has expanded to the point where we're now in touch with settlements in the foothills. At the same time, our work here has impressed the various clan leaders, creating an appetite for stone in the regional market. I can see how the stone can be easily transported, Florian said, but how is it procured? As strong as they might be compared to humans, beastmen would still find it impossible to quarry stone with their claws and teeth. We produce the necessary tools here, of course, the guildmaster said. The Stonecutter Guild's members provide education and training, though the process is expedited out of necessity. These guys sure didn't waste any time entrenching themselves out here. I wonder how much resistance their expansion encounters. It was a tidy little operation. Master Leeds and his people made themselves indispensable by being the sole source of tools and other manufactured goods for industries that they themselves promoted. They had placed themselves in the center of a market with enormous potential, acting as the gatekeepers of technological advancement and economic development for an entire people. The question was where they set the line between a welcome trade partner and a meddling foreign power. Leanne couldn't imagine anyone relinquishing the enviable position that Master Leeds and his guild members had created for themselves. It was pretty much a dream scenario for the guilds. We need to avoid going down any avenue that gives this guy an opportunity to push his members' interests. He has way too much influence as it is. Why must you go into every negotiation harboring the assumption that the other party is an adversary, because they always are in one way or another? The Beastman side of things seems a hell of a lot more disorganized, and they've been guided into chasing simple objectives. That's what we're here for anyway, right? I don't see how we can avoid involving the interests of the Merchants Guild with how much influence they seem to have in the regional economy. For the sake of clarity, Clara asked, how is trade organized in Rolengork? Before we arrived, my lady, Master Leeds answered, it was all tribe-based. The local merchants each operated in service to their respective communities, as did anyone related to any industries. Like human civilization, cities are places where excess resources and labor collect, but, unlike human civilization, they are treated as dumping grounds rather than centers of economic and political power. There was no investment in innovation, and cities were seen as a source of emergency war potential at best. I see, Clara said. How have things changed since then? Even a summary of what we've achieved will seem long-winded, the Guildmaster replied. Before the current crisis, we took a measured approach to change. Barter was the primary mode of exchange, so we prioritized the production of guild currency for circulation. At the same time, we laid the foundation for industries that were common in the Draconic Kingdom, but non-existent here in Rolengork. What was the role of Lady Shawk and her people in all of this? Ludmilla asked. I suppose Lady Shawk acts as something close to a local lord despite owning our contracts of indenture, Master Leeds answered. She set aside a space for us to live and build our workshops, provided security, and encouraged her people to adopt our way of doing things. We had no lack of interest in apprenticeships from the citizens. Have there been any mishaps between your people and the local beastmen? Clara asked. Nothing noteworthy, my lady. We humans rarely leave our part of the clan hold, and clan security does a good job of keeping troublemakers out. Has that remained the case even with the rising scarcity of food? If anything, the Guildmaster replied, things have gotten easier for us since the trouble here began. As you can imagine, there isn't any room for hesitation or fruitless debate with a disaster of this magnitude looming over everyone's heads. For better or worse, a state of disaster seemed to precede the Sorcerer's Kingdom wherever it went. The mountain dwarves were on the verge of annihilation when the Sorcerer King showed up. The Abelian Hills had been occupied by fiends, and the Holy Kingdom was invaded by those same fiends just a few months before the Sorcerer's Kingdom arrived to help. Then there was the Draconic Kingdom, which had been overrun by beastmen. The Dark Dwarves were simultaneously having a civil war while also facing an invasion from below. In every case, any qualms about entertaining the advances of a foreign power and its undead forces were conveniently swept aside in favor of overcoming the crises that faced each party. It was enough to make one wonder if it had all been orchestrated in advance to expedite the foreign policy objectives of the Sorcerer's Kingdom. Not that she cared either way beyond a morbid sense of curiosity. How has the relationship between the various vocations in this society changed with the onset of the current crisis? Clara asked. For instance, has the influence of the ranchers grown since they control the primary source of food? Fortunately, Master Leeds replied, that hasn't been the case, my lady. Beastman society has a strong, hierarchical structure where everyone is subservient to the ruling warrior clans. I'm tempted to say that Rolengork is best described as an alliance of armies that each just so happen to also run a country. But he just said it. I dislike the way this guildmaster is presenting things. What do you expect? Of course he's gonna make himself seem as important as possible in front of us. At least he admitted that the beastmen still maintain their old relationships. It's still something he's ahead of us on. These guys will be able to outmaneuver us if we need to build up our relationship with the clans from scratch. Is that something we have the luxury of thinking about right now? We can't risk millions of lives just to compete for influence. I could, but you'd all just abuse me if I tried. Let's see what happens if we limit trade to Clan Paken's needs. By all appearances, Clara said, Clan Paken's situation seems stable enough for regular trade. One of our remaining worries is whether our ships will be targeted by raids once the other clans discover what's being transported. Unfortunately, the guildmaster said, I can't guarantee that won't happen. It would be best to avoid contact with the other clans for the safety of your ships and their crews. Well, he sure was quick to jump on that. I know we beastmen have a poor reputation because of what was happening to the Draconic Kingdom, Lady Shawk said, but we're not a lawlessly violent people. If there's a reasonable way to get what we need without fighting for it, I'm sure the other clans would prefer to do that. Master Leeds glanced at the Osalo lords several times, but remained silent as she spoke. That is reassuring to hear, Lady Shawk. Clara smiled as she placed a sheet of parchment and pushed it across the table towards Master Leeds. For the time being, let's focus on Clan Paken's needs. We tested a number of samples with the local livestock and the results were promising. What are your expectations for trade in the near term? We'd obviously like to get our hands on as much as possible, Lady Corlin, the guildmaster said as he scanned the paper in front of him. Did the ranchers note any preferences out of this list? Unsurprisingly, Master Leeds didn't bat an eyelash at their asking prices, but Leanne had at least expected something out of the volumes they offered. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that they were claiming the equivalent of an entire country's merchant fleet in terms of cargo throughput. I believe they will continue to test combinations of fodder until they come up with portions they're satisfied with, Clara replied. We're unfamiliar with the animals ourselves, so it's entirely up to the ranchers to determine what's best for their herds. Several of the guildmaster's aides leaned in curiously, looking over his shoulder at the Sorceress Kingdom's list of offerings. After several moments, Master Leeds rose to his feet. If you don't mind, my lady, he said, I'd like to review what you have to offer with my people. By all means, Clara said. I'm sure you have many parties to confer with. Your understanding is greatly appreciated. Master Leeds lowered his head. Please feel free to take a look around the market. My people have gone to great lengths to draw out the potential in Roland Gork's natural wealth. Once the guildmaster and his associates made themselves scarce, Leanne got up from their table and hopped off of the viewing platform. Not a step later, she was knocked over and held down by a massive paw. Ha Olp! They're eating me. Some snatched her up by the collar. She tried curling up protectively until she noticed it was Ludmilla who was holding her. You saved me. I love you. Clara grabbed her by the arm and cast her back down to the pavement. It was just a gnar bumping into you. Watch where you're going. Another gnar bumped into Leanne, kicking her hard enough to send her rolling under a nearby stand. She checked her dress for holes before cautiously sticking her head out from beneath a heavy tablecloth. What are you doing? Ludmilla asked. Doing my best not to get bumped into, Leanne answered as she rose to her feet. Why is this happening all of a sudden? She scanned the crowd, searching for the remains of squished humans. The closest thing she could find, however, was a set of detached streamers that had fallen to the street. Maybe all of the ones who were most likely to fall victim had long been run down and eaten. Perhaps it was because Lady Shawk was with us, Florine said. We're just not accustomed to the flow of this city, Ludmilla said. It looks like beastmen aren't used to giving way to anyone smaller than them. As Ludmilla said so, an Irma walked straight into her. The towering beastman recoiled as if it had smashed into a fortress wall, taking down several other beastmen behind it as it fell sprawling to the street. Maybe they should rethink how their flow works. That may be problematic to implement. Many beastmen have issues focusing on more than one target at a time, so it's easier for individuals to react to immediate personal threats than it is to continually keep track of everything that's going on around them. They walked around the pile of confused beastmen, forming into a single file behind their newly appointed traffic shield. Ludmilla looked over her shoulder with a frown. What are you doing? She asked. Letting you blaze a trail for us, Leanne answered. Ooh, stop at that stand up ahead with the bolts of fabric. Their little column snaked through the crowd, quickly arriving at the fabric stall. A man dressed in merchant's garb commonly found in the Draconic Kingdom smiled at them as they browsed his inventory. Leanne rubbed the coarse fabric of a diamond-patterned rug between her fingers. "What's this made out of?" she asked. "The fibers are derived from a plant known as jute in much of the world, my lady," the merchant answered. "It was known to us in the Draconic Kingdom, but the plants grow too tall and thus could provide places from which beastmen could ambush us. Here in Rolen Gork, it goes between being a grazing crop for nug and a source of coarse thread for various goods. We have, of course, expanded upon its use with what we've been able to harvest." The merchant picked up a bolt of bright yellow cloth in both hands and held it out for them to examine. "With our superior tools and craftsmanship," he said, "we've been able to produce a much finer variant of thread compared to what the beastmen use." "What's jute mostly used for around here?" Leanne asked. "Logistical applications," the merchant said with a drawn-out sigh. "Rope and sackcloth, mostly. As you can see, the beastmen don't wear much. But worry not. The cloth woven from it is suitable for even the finest work." "I would mind taking some back with me," Clara said. "I'm sure the tailors in Corlin Harbor would be delighted to have a new material to work with." "Yeah, them and everyone else." The Sorceress Kingdom had what Leanne liked to call an everything problem. When it was a part of Riestize, the Duchy of Rantel was a fringe territory that bordered potentially, or just outright, hostile neighbors. Thus, the vast majority of its economy was made up of low-risk, low-investment industries like agriculture and forestry. While the city itself was known as a center of trade, it amounted to little more than a minor crossroads between Riestize, the Empire, and the theocracy. Customs revenues were passable as far as a city went, but they were a pittance when weighed against the needs of the duchy. So far, they managed to get by because agriculture and forestry just so happened to be what the duchy's human population needed to survive. Now that they were well past that point, all they could do was try to distract the people by funding renovation projects and promoting food culture. However, it wouldn't be long before a not insignificant number of citizens realized that places like the Empire and even Riestize were more abundant in what civilized folks considered the hallmarks of societal advancement. The royal court railed at the very idea that they might be seen as behind anyone else in that regard, but they couldn't seem to come up with any ideas that didn't involve taking other people's stuff by force or coercion. Importing manufactured goods was hit and miss. Mostly miss. The Azalisian mountain dwarves were the only nation that the Sorceress Kingdom could count on for reliable trade in that regard. Unfortunately, their nation was tiny, so it wouldn't be long before the Sorceress Kingdom's appetite for dwarven goods outgrew the dwarves' capacity to provide them. The inroads that they made with the imperial aristocracy dealt entirely with raw materials, and the Sorceress Kingdom didn't represent a large or lucrative enough market to pull the flow of finished goods away from places like our winter. In the end, it looked like they would just have to do everything themselves. Textiles was a field of manufacturing that she and her friends had taken a particular interest in. Not only would they always be in demand, but the industry itself promised to expand the horizons of their technological development. "I'll take a dozen bolts, as well," Florine said. "Hey, me too," Leanne added. "Could I also get some of the raw material you make this from?" They walked away from the stall with armfuls of cloth plus a basket of plants. Ludmilla wandered around a bit before finding an open spot where they could put their spoils away. "That was cheap," Leanne said. "We barely broke a silver each." "It was consistent with the prices at most of the stands we've passed," Clara said. "The cost of labor must be equally low." "Do you think Master Leeds will try to negotiate using prices from when he was last in the Draconic Kingdom?" Florine asked. "I don't see why he wouldn't at least try," Leanne shrugged. "Then letting us loose in this market may have been a mistake on his part," Florine said. "Then we should keep looking around to get a handle on the economy here," Leanne said. "I ain't giving the guy any more than he should get. It looks like someone got here before us." "It looks like a whole lot of people got here before us," Leanne sourly retorted. "Hey, isn't that Zushiru?" Lian grabbed her by the shoulders and turned her in the general direction of Zhu Shiru. Ludmilla rolled her eyes before leading her friends over to meet him. The Quagoa merchant was at a nearby stand, gesticulating with a claw as he interacted with a human and two Gao over a pile of animal hides. I'm surprised Zhu Shiru was the first one to come out. Why is that? Well, look at him. He's small and fluffy and this place is full of giant cats and dogs. He's a mole beast man, not a mole. Plus, it shouldn't be all that surprising. Quagoa fur is as strong as plate armor and they mostly live underground. They wouldn't have a natural fear of Rolenkork's beastmen. Why do you stare at Zhu Shiru? How did you get here without being kicked all over the place? Lian asked. Zhu Shiru did not, the Quagoa merchant answered. Zhu Shiru rolled halfway here. He's used to being treated as a living ball, Ilishnesh said. Batting him around is quite cathartic. Ludmilla wasn't sure if she wanted to explore the implications of the Frost Dragon's statement. She wasn't given the chance to with her friends crowding in on Zhu Shiru. Watch her find? Lian asked. This market is strange, Zhu Shiru answered. Many different stalls, but not proportional to clan inventories. Ah, that's because they're trying to showcase all the different things they have, Lian said. There's only so much space in the market, yeah. Zhu Shiru scratched his chest, his rodent-like nose pointing into the air as he studied his surroundings. But is that not misleading? Not if people understand what's going on, Lian replied. You having some kind of problem? No problem, Zhu Shiru turned his attention back to the stall. Just finished dealing with these three. They had many hides to trade. The Quagoa merchant produced a vellum scroll as he spoke and offered it to Lian. Ludmilla looked over Lian's shoulder as she unfurled it, furrowing her brow as she examined the details of the trade. It was partially written in Draconic, but the trade itself was scribed according to Merchant Guild standards. This is a lot of hides, Lian said. Where did you get all the grain to trade for this? Zhu Shiru kept some contracts. Price was good, thought might be useful elsewhere. So the hides are going to the tribes in the Sorceress Kingdom? Yes. They say there is great shortage of hides now. Does Wagner clan know why? Sorta. The reason is kinda weird and you don't have to worry about it. What hide shortage is he referring to? The one caused by the mystery meat. Mystery meat? Yeah, the emergency provisions that the royal court can somehow always come up with. Like those fish with no bones or organs. Ah. She knew about what Lian was referring to, but she hadn't considered the wider implications. During her visit to the Great Tomb of Nazarick, Ludmilla discovered that many similar phenomena occurred. Normally, when one hunted or foraged for resources, say, felled a deer, various products resulted. Not only was there meat, but also fat, blood, bone, antler, cartilage, internal organs, and so on. Those in turn could go to artisans such as cooks, tanners, jewelers, smiths, and alchemists. In the Great Tomb of Nazarick, however, a resource was only ever one thing. For instance, a berry bush growing in a node in the realm of Lady Aura and Lord Mayor only produced berries. Its flowers and leaves couldn't be harvested to make tea or medicine, nor could its branches be burned as fuel. A tree grown for the purpose of being harvested for lumber was only that. Its sap couldn't be collected to make syrup nor its resin turned into pitch. Leaves, bark, and roots effectively didn't exist the moment the tree was cut down. It simply became wood, which in turn was processed into wood products which Nazarick's denizens had recipes for. The mystery meat that Lian referred to followed the same logic. It was meat generated by something and thus only served as meat. The other materials that normally came with hunting and butchering an animal didn't exist. In hindsight, it made sense that anyone who became dependent on the Sorceress Kingdom's emergency provisions ended up suffering from shortfalls related to their strange and arbitrary form. Perhaps strangest of all was that Nazarick's denizens didn't recognize it as strange. If anything, it was the fact that things weren't the case outside of Nazarick that was strange to them. Not that it prevented them from taking advantage of how things worked on the outside. Indeed, many of the experiments that Lord Mayor and Lady Aura were conducting in Warden's Vale were related to just that. You didn't clean them out, did you? Leanne asked. We can procure much more through our trade channels, the human merchant answered. I would be more than happy to take your orders right now. We'll mention it to Master Leeds, Leanne said. Speaking of which, it looks like he's coming back out. I should take care of some other things while you three negotiate. What other things? I left a ship full of my subjects at the port, for one. There's also Count Zalu and Count Kaeo. What are you going to tell them? What else can I tell them? They'll come up here on their own, eventually. What are you going to tell them? Ludmilla frowned down at Leanne. Leanne frowned up at Ludmilla. Well, at least get us back to that platform. I don't feel like getting trampled any more than necessary. With a long sigh, Ludmilla made her way through the crowded market. It wasn't as if she was knocking down beastmen left and right to clear a path for them. Master Leeds and his aides lowered their heads as they rejoined them on the observation platform. Do you have any further questions for us, Master Leeds? Clara asked. A few, my lady, the Guildmaster answered, but we should naturally arrive at them over the course of our discussion. Very well, Clara said. Let us continue. Lady Shawk will be hosting a banquet this evening and I hope we'll make some favourable progress before then. Master Leeds' gaze went to Ludmilla as she turned to leave. Will you not all be joining us? He asked. We've left our ships and their occupants unattended for several hours now, Clara answered. Those occupants came to observe and interact with the people of Rolengork, so Baroness Zaradnik is going to bring those who are ready to disembark. Are there any objections to this? Ludmilla asked. Not at all, the Guildmaster answered. Everyone's welcome. Ilishnish fell into step beside her as she made her way out of the market square. Are you sure you don't want to attend the negotiations? This place has been all about economic activity for months. I was hoping you'd pursue something other than that. To be honest, I came here with distinct economic objectives in mind, but Master Leeds does nothing but annoy me with his one-sided presentation. It does seem like something you wouldn't fancy. The way things are going around here, however, makes it look like the locals have accepted the change that Master Leeds champions as necessary. I can't say whether it is or isn't without learning more about what's going on. All I've heard is that the grazing cycle of Rolengork's herds has been disrupted, leading to a disruption in the beastmen's food supply. The flooding only affects the lowlands. It seems that the traditional way of dealing with food shortages is sending extra mouths away. Conveniently, it just so happens that there are escalating border conflicts to send those extra mouths to. That was one solution for food shortages that humans didn't resort to. It generally didn't cross their minds that they could eat their neighbors or die trying. Instead, they just fought amongst themselves for resources. Would it be strange to consider that as a human disadvantage? It likely was. While humans or other species whose societies had similar values might claim what they considered the moral high ground, the reality was that Rolengork's approach consolidated its excess population and pointed it at its competitors. Success meant access to more land and resources through migration or military expansion. Failure meant fewer mouths to feed, which in turn reduced the chance of chaos breaking out at home. Of course, that only worked if the target wasn't overwhelmingly more powerful. Or did it? Other races didn't necessarily have anything remotely resembling human values. For all she knew, powerful countries elsewhere might simply consider it a natural sequence of events or even a source of sustenance to be harnessed. My concern is that this appeal to necessity is facilitating the unfiltered adoption of technology, industry, and customs. What works in the Draconic Kingdom for humans isn't necessarily good for the beastmen of Rolengork. I believe the elders of Osalo-Pakan voiced the same concerns just before you arrived. I don't think I've seen any of these elders. They were the group present in Shawk's Court when your party was introduced. They're usually out and about advising community members, mediating conflicts, and maintaining the law and traditions of the clan. Where can I find them now? There are always a few of them loitering around the court. With her friends focused on trade, it would be prudent to provide a more balanced perspective by speaking with the clan elders. Unfortunately, convincing the royal court that her findings were in any way relevant to their assignment might be difficult. As far as the king's cabinet was concerned, Rowland Gork was first and foremost an opportunity for economic gain. They cared little, if at all, for outsiders, so allowing the guilds to reshape Rowland Gork to their liking was merely an expedient way to achieve the Sorceress Kingdom's objectives in the eyes of the royal court. Ludmilla leaned over the railing of the lift as it lowered them to the river port. More people were milling about on the ship's main deck than before, and some had even joined Chief S's and Chief Ganzu on the wharf. The two chiefs were chatting with a few of the dock workers as she came up behind them. "I hope you're not interfering with their work," Ludmilla said. The demi-humans in front of her started in unison. "Oh, of course not," Chief Ganzu said. "I was just curious if these people were related to gnolls in some way." Ludmilla's gaze went to the group of dock workers, who consisted of 3 Lup and 2 Gao. While they possessed a set of superficial similarities, those on their own didn't prove any relation. And it turns out that they don't even know what a gnoll is, the orc chief chuckled nervously. "The world is more vast than I could have ever imagined. The beastmen in the central parts of the jungle aren't exposed to any races but their own," Ludmilla said. "You may have better luck asking those dwelling in their borderlands." "Are we going somewhere?" "Yes, but not that far," Ludmilla replied. "Since trade negotiations are well underway, I thought it would be a good opportunity to bring our people ashore. Have the mystics finished examining all of the passengers?" Chief S's turned an eye to CSH, who nodded in response. "We detected no new symptoms," the lizardman druid said. "I can't promise it will remain that way, though. Not only does moving from place to place carry the risk of exposing one to new illnesses, but this jungle is filled with things that can easily transmit diseases to the soft-skinned." "Do orcs count as soft-skinned?" Chief Ganzu asked. "In this case, yes," CSH answered. "Your thick hides and layers of fat and muscle may protect you from physical blows, but biting and burrowing insects can still get through." "We'll issue a general advisory to the people," Ludmilla said. "I'm sure everyone will take it seriously after what happened yesterday." While no beastmen greeted them upon their entry into the jungle, plenty of other things did. Within half a day of sailing across the border, over a dozen different ailments plagued the ship's passengers. It took the rest of the day for the demi-human mystics to bring things under control, and barely anyone wanted to go outside after that. "I need to check on a few things on board," Ludmilla said. "Please gather your elders in the meantime." "Just the elders?" Chief S's asked. "Anyone who wishes to come along may do so," Ludmilla answered. "Our hosts are preparing a feast for us this evening. We should at least have each side's leadership meet with one another before then." She scaled the ship's gangway and scanned through the people loitering on the main deck. Not finding who she was looking for, she descended into the barge's bowels, where she found the delegation's remaining aristocrats seated around a table in the lounge. Count Kaio gave her a single look before releasing a resigned sigh. "So you were the only survivor. I suppose that's to be expected." "The others are conducting negotiations as planned," Ludmilla replied. "I came to inform you of a surprising discovery. It appears that the Pakan clan has over 100 humans from the Draconic Kingdom living in one of their clanholds' quarters." Count Kaio and Count Zulu rose to their feet with incredulous looks. "How can this be?" Count Zulu said, "The beastmen never take prisoners. Victims of their raids are brutally butchered and consumed with no survivors." "That may be the truth as you know it," Ludmilla said, "but we saw what we saw." "For how long have they been here?" Count Kaio asked. "What is their condition? How are they being treated?" "According to both Lady Shawk and the humans we've spoken with," Ludmilla answered, "they were citizens of Rivergarden during the occupation. I don't know the exact date, But they sold themselves into slavery not long before the Sorceress Kingdom started its campaign to reclaim the Draconic Kingdom. That's quite the timing, Count Kaio said. They signed themselves into slavery? Count Zulu furrowed his brow. Why would they do such a thing? It was at the prompting of a foreign visitor, Ludmilla replied. A Nar from the Beastman Confederacy, if accounts are to be believed. The Beastman Confederacy? As in the Beastman Confederacy? My knowledge of the wider world is limited, Ludmilla said, so I only know of one place that claims the name. At any rate, the Beastman occupiers were running low on food, and this visitor proposed to save the humans by having Lady Shawk take them back with her as slaves. Count Zulu crossed his arms, the furrow on his brow deepening even further. That doesn't make any sense, he said. Why would this visitor want to save humans at the expense of other beastmen? There must at least be some merit to the suggestion, Count Kaio added. To begin with, Ludmilla told them, it isn't guaranteed that someone will use race to determine things, even if it is their own. Humans have plenty of disagreements and conflicts with one another despite being of a single race. As for merit, the slaves are members of various guilds and their families. They've been sharing the knowledge of their respective crafts as well as introducing a number of concepts that are novel to the beastmen. I'm not so sure how I feel about that, Count Zulu said. The beastmen are a problem enough with just teeth, claws, and rocks. They are no longer a problem for the Draconic Kingdom, Ludmilla noted. Perhaps not, the Marshal replied, but they have other neighbors. I cannot imagine they would be pleased to learn of any advancements gained by the beastmen due to our people. We may even be considered an accessory to their actions. Amod Zulu's stance was understandable considering he was a scion of Eastwatch. However, it wasn't the best outlook to openly display considering their current objectives in Roland Gork. I'm wary of this collaboration for other reasons, Ludmilla said. As I mentioned, these human slaves are members of the guilds. They seem more than happy to spread the knowledge of their craft and the systems that they favor. Knowledge without understanding is often disastrous for all parties involved. So you're worried about the beastmen? Count Kaio arched an eyebrow. Their circumstances may differ, but the realities involved are not dissimilar to what the various tribes absorbed by the Sorceress Kingdom now face. Well, I can't say for sure what the Draconic Kingdom's stance on this will be, the shorter nobleman said. We must first inform our queen of what has happened here. Are you able to facilitate correspondence with Orichalon? That shouldn't be a problem, Ludmilla said. Based on the distance, delivering a letter should take a day at worst. Then we should get to writing one, Count Kaio said. How would Queen Auriculus respond to the news? Her current posture was one of reconciliation with the Draconic Kingdom's longtime nemesis, so Ludmilla wasn't particularly worried about undesirable reactions. What bothered her was the fact that both the Beastmen and Master Leeds people still believed that the Draconic Kingdom had been overrun by the undead. She and her friends still hadn't figured out how to untangle that particular act of deception yet. And here I thought it was such a good idea. It was, given what they knew at the time. Unfortunately, that didn't extricate the Sorcerer's Kingdom from its role in exterminating millions of beastmen using an army of the undead. Count Kaio and Count Zulu disappeared into their quarters, leaving Nemel Gran alone at their table. The Imperial Scion shifted slightly under Ludmilla's gaze. You are coming with us, Ludmilla said. I am? I brought you to meet the people here, and so we shall. I still don't understand the reasoning behind that, my lady, Nemel said. I'm not anything special, I'm just a silly girl from the Imperial Heartland. I happen to value the perspective of someone from the Imperial Heartland, Ludmilla told her. You also help govern an area that many different races call home, so the experience should be useful. Considering the Empire's expansionary trajectory, knowing how those raised in Baharuth culture perceived and reacted to the societies of races outside the human sphere of influence was particularly valuable. It would be some time before General Ray's 6th Army Group, which had learned some harsh lessons on its initial foray into what they considered the frontier, reformed itself into a proper expeditionary force. In that time, Ludmilla sought a way to sway the empire from its traditional methods of expansion to something more amenable to the Sorcerer's Kingdom's domestic policies. As Nemel went to prepare herself for the outing, Ludmilla checked on the Narcub in Florine and Leanne's quarters. She frowned as he opened one eye to watch her from where he was curled up on the bed, but didn't otherwise react. How has Florine been raising him? Her friend had fully taken over the care of the cub partway through her assignment in the Abelian Hills, so Ludmilla figured she had found a suitable environment to raise him in. However, as the young of a predatory species went, he seemed uncharacteristically docile. "I'm ready, my lady." Ludmilla turned to find Nemel adorned for travel in inclement weather. Considering the hot and humid environment of Roland-Gork, it didn't look very comfortable. "Don't you think you're a bit overdressed for the occasion?" Ludmilla asked. "I don't think anyone could be overdressed for this place," Nemel answered. "Didn't you see that wasp that attacked Nob? It was as long as my leg and nearly carried him away. Even the flies are the size of a fist around here." "Only a handful of insects are that large," Ludmilla said. "Even a handful is too much," Nemel replied. "I've prepared spells and brought wands for self-defense, as well." The Imperial Scion parted her mantle to display a set of wands holstered on each hip. "Are those for the bugs or the beastmen?" Ludmilla asked. "Yes, my lady." Ludmilla shook her head as they ascended to the main deck. The goblins scattered around the ship immediately noted their appearance and gathered around Nemel. "Go?" Nob asked. "Go." Another goblin said. "Go. Go. Go." The sound of spears clashing against shields filled the air as the goblins danced around them. One could have easily mistaken the activity as the prelude to a raid instead of a, presumably, friendly visit. "Are they allowed to come?" Nemel asked. "Of course," Ludmilla answered. "Just make sure they behave themselves." "I'll try, my lady." Ludmilla watched in bemusement as Nemel marched her column of goblins down the gangplank to the wharf. The nearby beastmen didn't seem to know what to make of the scene. "Is everyone here?" Ludmilla asked as she joined her subjects on the wharf. "We went to gather the elders," Chief S's answered, "but it turned out everyone wanted to go." "There should be enough space for everyone," Ludmilla answered, "though it may take a while to get everyone to the top." The lift could accommodate Nemel and her goblins easily enough, but the other groups required several trips to make it to the top. Ludmilla idly watched the beastmen working the treadwheels, wondering how strenuous the task of operating the lift was. "What should we expect from this meeting with Clan Pakan's elders?" Chief Gan Zu asked. "I was actually hoping you might have a better idea," Ludmilla answered. "They were completely silent in our introductions to Lady Shawk." "Are their elders even the same as ours?" "Elder refers to the wealth of knowledge and experience one possesses and the value such an individual has to society," Ludmilla replied. "I can't imagine their elders are fundamentally much different from yours or anyone else's." The orc chief crossed his arms and wrinkled his porcine snout in thought. "What you say may be true," Chief S's said from beside him, "but our elders have never had discussions with the elders of other races. With those of other lizardman tribes, yes, but never anyone beyond that." "Is that true of the Ganzu tribe, as well?" Ludmilla asked. "The answer is not so simple. Our elders and those of other Abelian tribes count powerful warriors and hunters amongst their number. As we raid and are raided, I can't say that those elders don't come into contact with the elders of other tribes. In fact, it's quite likely given the position of honor they hold. But that contact is never peaceful. Generally not." "In that case," Ludmilla said, "consider the relationship between the Winterscale and Ganzu. Establishing something similar with the Pakan would be ideal." "Are they also to be your subjects?" Chief S's asked. "No," Ludmilla answered. "They are simply prospective trade partners for now, but I'd still like for everyone to get along." A small crowd of curious onlookers formed in the nearby courtyards and between the buildings by the time the lift finished its work. Humans, apparently, were no longer a novel sight in the clanhold. Ludmilla eyed the lizard men and orcs as they reacted warily to the attention. "How do you feel?" she asked. "Like I should attack them before they attack me first," Chief Ganzu answered. "I want to go home," said Chief S's. "At least it isn't solely humans who feel that way." The tension in the air slowly faded as they left the crowd behind. It immediately returned when two burly Osalo stepped forward to bar their way to the topmost terrace. "What is your business here?" one of them demanded. "This is not a place for trade." "There is far more to life than trade," Ludmilla replied. "We are here to speak with your elders." "We've heard nothing about this." "That's because nothing's been said about it," Ludmilla said. "And under the Guildmaster's guidance, I doubt anything of the sort would have ever been scheduled." Several moments passed in silence before one of the guards turned to ascend the stairs. Several minutes later, he returned. "The elders will see you," he said. "But be warned, our warriors will be watching you and your people closely." "As you should," Ludmilla said. She allowed herself a slight smile as she stepped between the two beastmen. It had been a long time since a guard hadn't instantly capitulated to her while she represented the Sorceress Kingdom.